Hey, how you doing? My name's Steve Reagan with CSO Online. We're at the RSA conference in California. I'm with Chris Gates and Ken Johnson. We are going to be talking about DevOps tool chains, breaking them and protecting them. Guys, yesterday you did a talk out here that I thought was pretty cool. I've heard about it through the buzz line, so we're setting you up for a little quick talk about this, if you don't mind. DevOps has been around for a while, but it's still kind of new. It's gaining some buzz, if you will. But your talk yesterday was about attacks on the tool chains and defending the tool chains. Can you give me a little breakdown on that?
Sure. We basically broke the talk down into three components: host-based, human-based, and infrastructure-based. And for host-based, we wanted to protect developer laptops. For human-based, we wanted to be able to, with all the prevalence of GitHub and pastebins, you're able to very quickly make mistakes and push things out to the internet that shouldn't be there. So we want to be able to have a way for organizations to identify that as quickly as possible and then work to either take those down or change the tokens or creds that get lost. And then infrastructure is all the tools that are supporting that. So all the various DevOps in-memory databases or just tools, Jenkins, Hudson, all those other things that are being used to compile code and basically allow businesses to move at the speed that they're moving today. And then a big healthy chunk of AWS, since that's the place that most people are doing cloud-based things at the moment.
So let's talk about some examples of the types of attacks you've seen or that you discussed yesterday.
So from an infrastructure, kind of the catchphrase we were using for the talk was what's old is new again. So when I started doing this in the 2000s, we were getting past the open ports and unauth services where you could telnet right into people's important stuff. Over the years, we've gotten past that. We fixed a lot of those problems, and now with cloud, we've actually come full circle back to unauth, open ports, and services back on the internet again. So we talked a lot about how these tools, in many cases, ship in an insecure manner, and the developers expect you to, read the manual, understand the assumptions they make with these tools, and do that. Most of those assumptions are not putting these things on the internet. So not binding to a public interface, not allowing anyone on the internet to interact with it. So examples we gave were like open Redis servers. Mm-hmm. You can view all the data in those, manipulate all the data in those, and then we also showed how you can get shells on those. And the example we showed was there's some person that's mining altcoins on a whole bunch of Redis boxes all over the world. We gave some examples of like how the MongoDB databases have been starting to get ransomware, Elasticsearch databases are starting to get ransomware. We also talked about big data, so like Hadoop clusters are also, when they're set up in an insecure manner, can be also remote code execution. So just all those different things to worry about.
So we've been talking about a couple of those things on CSO for a little while now, especially the Mongo stuff, because that just seemed it was something waiting to happen. I mean, these databases are just all over the web, completely exposed. So when you talked about AWS, what kind of advice were you giving administrators when they were talking about dropping this stuff online?
AWS ships with the ability to monitor your environment, right? It's got services available to it that allow you to detect attacks. Mm-hmm. What we see though is that often does not happen. So if you were to find a leaked key and review a monitoring configuration or even hardening configuration of an AWS environment, you'd see that often that is not utilized. But again, AWS does put out a lot of information. So besides developers leaking keys, which is super common, besides exploiting developer laptops that have those keys, it comes down to hardening AWS itself, so that if that does happen, you minimize the damage that can occur to an AWS environment or a company in general.
So off the top of your head, like what are 2 or 3 things you would must absolutely be done when it comes to hardening AWS?
Turning on monitoring. So there are 3 services, CloudTrail, Config, and CloudWatch, used in tandem with each other. You can detect a lot. In fact, one of the tools Chris wrote, we showed attacking the environment using that tool, and then using one of these services to actually detect his tool. So we kind of gave the kryptonite as well as the attack. Hardening. So one obvious thing I think is that you should enable multi-factor authentication, not only for the web console, but what most people fail to do is to place that on the AWS API itself. Meaning, again, what we see most often are not like username and passwords used to log into the AWS the AWS console, we most often see secret access keys, which are used for the API. So when people don't enforce multi-factor authentication, those keys are leaked. There's no protection on the API. So I know that's probably not the top 3 things. I guess the other piece would be don't use your root account. We see that super often, people using root account as an operational account.
When you were doing the background research for your talk and getting all this stuff together, what was running through your mind when you'd see some of these careless mistakes? I mean, was it more like, lulz, I can't believe you're doing this? Or was it, you just kind of want to punch through the monitor, like, what's wrong with you?
I think you initially have I can't believe someone was horrible enough to do this. And then you hit with the realization of these are most likely someone's important business. Like this could be someone's business. The good example we gave is Codespaces a few years ago, right?
Oh, that was painful.
Not in business anymore
Yeah.
because they deleted everything.
That's like the only real example you could say of a company that had like bad security practices and got popped, and they went out of business because of this. I mean, that's one of the few nightmare realities.
Yeah, I don't think any business ever wants to test their DR plan. And they had to test theirs and it didn't work, which is pretty bad.
Painful.
And then you kind of get hit with especially for cloud things, you really don't know who these things belong to a lot of times. And so even if I would want to report these things and help someone fix them with AWS and these other cloud things, I don't know how to identify who this is. So it can be a challenge to help these people. All these people that had altcoin miners on their Redis boxes would have loved to have told them, hey, you need to fix this, but I don't even know how to get a hold of them.
Yeah, it's easier said than done in most cases. So when you were, to kind of wrap things up, guys, if you had any final thoughts that you wanted administrators or business leaders to know, what are they?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So essentially take the time to understand the security models of the tools you're using. So understand those security models, train developers. If you're on the security team, train developers on the secure configuration of those tools, and then create secure baselines as well. And one thing I wanted to point out was Alex Lucas from AWS gave a talk at reInvent on automating secure baselines for your EC2 machines, and those are, again, employing DevOps practices. You can automate so much in the baseline configuration space.
I would add, just like Windows, you need to pay attention to security patches that come out for these tools. Historically, they don't do a great job of explaining the risk to any one particular CVE. So if you're deploying Jenkins or Redis or Hadoop or any of these other things, you need to keep up with the security patches for those. And sometimes those are fire and forget kind of things.